Jim Carroll, Ralph Baber, psychology takeaway. You need a dose of the real. Life's absurd. We know the deal. Did you hear? Don't let it get you down. Turn that frown. Upside down, upside down, 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 upside.
Hi, this is Jim.
And Ralph
And this is
and Jazlyn.
Jazlyn.
Yeah, and hey, in a TED Talk a while ago, Philip Zimbardo said, "Here are some of the problems that youth have today," and he outlined a whole bunch of them. And the interviewer said, "Okay, you've given us the problems. What are the solutions?" And Zimbardo says, "Hey, that's not my job. I'm not here to give solutions. I'm just here to give you the problems." Well, we gave you the problems in part one with Gen Alpha and Gen Z. So we are, unlike Phil Zimbardo, here to try and answer some of the questions that we raised in part one. Hi, Jazlyn.
Hi. How are you? Back
Hey,
to another episode.
Yeah, the first one went really, really quickly. It flew by, and I hadn't realized that I misread the clock. So that's, hey, this is another episode, part two. And let's recap what we know about Gen Alpha and Gen Z. You want to do that for us, Jazlyn?
Absolutely. We're exposed to a lot of social media and technology. And though there is a different way of doing things than our previous generations, it can be approached with respect, compassion, and being able to set certain boundaries and understand that we don't need to live in the augmented reality. We can take account to it and saying, this is what we see, this is what is possible, but being able to think for ourselves and not become too reliant on the outcome, but to truly enjoy and see the value of the process.
Okay. And so kids who seem to be kind of umbilically attached to their pads or something like that, their augmented reality, are going to be weaned away from that at some point in time.
I think so if they set the proper boundaries for themselves. And I think that's just kind of looking at what do you want out of life? Where do you want to get to? And then what are you willing to do to be able to get there, right? Like some of the most successful people that they look up to, they use it as a resource. It's not using them. And I think people nowadays doesn't even know when that's happening, right? And there's some studies done that when we're anxious, of course our body language change, but oftentimes we may just rely on our phone because it's the easiest thing to do.
So let me ask you, Jazlyn, do you think we are accidentally, for some of this generation, raising people that are too fragile?
Too fragile? No. I actually think there's some things in this time that we're witnessing and going through that previous generations haven't seen. And of course, some of it is just different, right? But I do believe that some of the reactions that are seen in this generation, based on some of the things that we experience, I think there's a lack of hands on and compassion from previous generations and just saying, oh, well, you need to do it like this. This is the right way. Or that is not given enough space sometimes to say, this is the narrative I want you to have compared to this is who you are. So let me help you hone in what you are, right? And give you
Okay.
some guidance instead of pushing you towards this because that's where you're going to get a lot of friction. I think that's also part of the dichotomous situation that we're in.
Okay.
You know, back in the day, my wife says that her father talked to her about her possibilities as a young woman growing up in Saginaw. And he said, girls, not women, girls can be secretaries, teachers, or nurses. Well, nowadays, our kids have a lot more options. And in fact, the things like social media have really underscored, those kinds of options. And remember Cameron, the model that we had with TED Talks. Anyhow, she talks about the fact that, yes, she's a model. Yes, she's pretty. Yes, she was a Victoria's Secret model for 10 years or so. But the kids today have a lot more options than just walking around in their underwear. They can become brain surgeons. They can become astronauts. They can become the sky's is limitless almost, as opposed to the pronouncement of Sheila's dad. Teacher, secretary, nurse. What do you think about that, Jazlyn?
I think comes privilege also should come some form of humility to understand the shoes that other people walk in, as you mentioned, Ralph, in the previous conversation, where you can't judge anyone until they walk in your moccasins or something like
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah.
that
Walk a mile in somebody else's moccasins before you judge them, and you'll understand more about where their experience has led them. And, one of the things, the the thing with our generation, Jim and I, is we we sometimes feel that we are compelled to try and be modern. And that sometimes for us means that we think we have to surrender wisdom. And I don't think that is true. I think we have some things that if we do them in the right way, the wisdom that we've accumulated by being left alone unsupervised and getting our experience, we can pass on to the next generation.
And that's a good point, Ralph. Wisdom versus information or knowledge.
Yeah.
So that old people like you have some wisdom, right?
Well, I would like to think so. I'm not entirely sure that's correct, but
Whereas the Gen
there's a-
Alpha and Gen Z sure have the access to information and knowledge, right?
yeah, I mean, you can get any number of factoids, but then how do you put them together?
that's true wisdom. My grandfather always taught me that the wisest people are those who know that they're not that wise. And
Yeah.
that's, again, it's part of the solution I was mentioning, which is that humility. I think there's a part of it where you guys have so many different experiences and representation of what it means to push through something. And I think this is so close to home to me personally as well, because one of my grandparents, he runs a tax business and he's kind of scared of going into the technological advances. Like, he's used to all his clients coming in, they handling business, and he does it all on his own, right? And so we have conversations about, well, you may need some help because times are changing, whether that's with his health, whether that's just with how he needs to approach things, what comes down to the family, the household, and other things that comes into that. And it's kind of hard to push for that change, because I do know that back then, and I do believe he needs to slow down at this moment, but back then it's like, that's all it was. Like, I woke up, I went to work, this is how I made my living. Why should I stop now? Why should I slow down now? And I think there's power in unplugging. I think there's power in stopping and sitting back and watching, reflecting, and seeing what you represent and what those around you represent as well. Because the work that we contribute into this world isn't just about us. It's going to affect those that came before us and those who came behind us. And so, even attributing to my podcast, Living in Legacy, that's what it's about. Like, the legacy that we have, we're living in. And it's
Yeah.
not just about one generation, it's about all the generations come together.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, but remember that the only person that likes change is a wet baby. The rest of us don't handle it all that well. But yeah, let's talk about your podcast.
Okay, let's
Okay.
do it.
It's called Living
In Legacy.
in Legacy. Now, the that's kind of reverse from what I think of. I think of, you leave your legacy at the end of what your life, right? But your hypothesis is that you make your legacy as you go along, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So why don't you unpack that for our viewers?
Yes. So, Living in Legacy, the goal is to be able to get our listeners and viewers, sorry, to be able to get our listeners and viewers to be able to step into who they are and not just think about always striving towards something, just becoming and being okay with where you are, right? Like, we think of big figures, one that I aspire, or I won't say aspire to be like, but one that I look up to that's a role model for me is Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama didn't become who she was in one day. But there was a moment in time she has to re like reaffirm with herself who she was, to be able to walk onto the stages that she did, to be able to talk to the people and connect with the people that she did. That wasn't something she was like, okay, well, this is going to happen afterwards, right? And I think that's something that our generations before sometimes also contributed. Like, this is for tomorrow, but what about today? Who
Okay.
are you today?
Yeah. Like Ralph and I wanted to be cowboys. Now, growing up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, we didn't have a lot of cowboy role models, did we, Ralph?
Except in the movies, no.
Yeah. So the possibility of growing up to be cowboys was really slim. You know, the possibility of growing up to be the president's wife for Michelle was really slim. But she could begin to, develop the skills necessary to be someone on, what, center stage.
Right. It was all part of the process. And that's
Okay.
what I want to shine light on and have the value like reevaluated for so many people, especially my generation.
Mm-hmm.
Me even doing the podcast, that's a form of representation for me. So I'm showing that it's not just possible, and with the guests that I bring on to be able to talk about their experiences, we're not just talking about their successes. You can Google them and find that out.
Yeah.
But like, how did they become? Why are they becoming?
Mm-hmm.
That's more important when I think about legacy, because there's different outcomes, but the process is what impacts other people. The process is what builds that resilience. That's what keeps us from being so fragile a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
I was taught that the easiest way to kill a king is in kid form. So that fragile things, when we first start a process, yes, we are fragile to some extent, because it's some things we just don't know, some things that we haven't been exposed to. But the more exposure, the more you see that representation, the stronger you become.
Mm-hmm. Let's use the podcast as an example.
Mhm.
Now, Ralph and I have been doing this since 2019. We started out with it's my laptop and Podbean, and now we're here in our beautiful university studio with our fantastic guests. But that was a process in order to kind of get there. And the I suppose the temptation would have been early on when we were stumbling around, Ralph, and we did stumble, didn't we?
We did
Yeah.
several times.
Several times, several. Yeah, I was to maybe just give it up, but hey, we show up every week. Our listeners and viewers show up, and we thank you for that. How about you, Jazlyn? Has this been a process for you? Not every university student does their own podcast, or some of them do it for a couple of weeks and then stop. I know that.
Absolutely. So when I first started, it was about a year ago.
Uh-huh.
Even before that, I started with the podcast called Innovate Mindfully, but that was for RSO, which is a registered student organization here at Central Michigan University. And I had no idea what I was doing. I knew I had something to talk about. I knew I liked to talk, but I had no structure, no system, no organization to be able to carry it through. So that ended maybe 6 months after, and one episode got published for it, right? Then I was praying.
Okay,
I
let's
was,
say
yeah.
what you didn't have. You did an episode, it got out, but initially you were lacking structure and what else?
I was like an organization
Organization.
and really a long term goal for it, right? It was like I had a lot to talk about, but where am I really going? Learning my target audience. And that's
Okay.
where business came in.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's something that our Gen Alpha kids will learn, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Life is better if you have some structure, if you have some organization, and you have a goal. Yeah, okay.
And I think it's good to note too that just like every organization, not everyone follows the same system, but there is a system though. And to be able to build that system, you have to be willing to give and take. You have to be willing to sacrifice to be able to sit down, listen more than what you're willing to talk. And so that's what I did to be able to get to Living in Legacy. I was able to ask some of the questions. I networked. I knew that if I wanted it, I'm going to get it. And it may not look the way that I want it to look like, but it's going to be rooted in the goal and the overarching theme of what I'm trying to achieve and knowing that target audience. So the more specific we are able to get with our goals, the more likely we are to succeed in them. And that's where Living Legacy came in. I knew that some of the experiences and some of the, I don't want to call them limits, but for lack of better words, because of some of the experiences I just haven't had, I knew the best way to leverage that was having other guests on. And I knew I can ask the questions. I knew about their background. I did my research for it. So how can I answer this question with the credibility and the trust to gain some of the viewers and the audiences that came from having these features on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to leverage those resources, I'm huge on being resourceful.
Okay. So, for our solution to the Gen Alpha dilemma, listen to other people, talk to other people, get input, but don't give up your own sense of identity, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Who you are, that's what's going to differentiate you. When we think
Yeah.
about innovations, it's always something that makes you unique. Whether it's that customer experience, you may be having a similar product, right? But the way that you sell it is what's going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah. And one of the things that Jim and I have done with this, we are podcasting to present information, get wisdom from our guests, thoughts from our guests that maybe challenge people who are listening. And also, we have never set out to make money. So, Joe Rogan, if you ask him, he will say, "Oh, yeah, I started podcasting because I wanted to make money with it." We don't. So, we haven't made any money.
And we've been terribly successful at that, haven't we, Ralph?
We have. But that's the thing. If you set a goal, you can achieve it. If you set out to make a journey and you don't know where you're going, you will always get somewhere.
Right.
It won't be where you necessarily wanted, but it'll be somewhere.
It'll be where you need to be at that time,
Yeah.
most definitely. And that's nothing with profit over being people centric. You mentioned that in the first episode. We kind of talked about that within the problem. When people aren't people centric, where does that lead to? Well, the money is going to follow regardless. And some things are just a greater impact than what money could actually give. And I know that's easier said than done, right? With some people, that's like, okay, well, I need money. I have bills and everything. I'm not saying don't have that place where you can find that stability starting off, but make sure that it's very intentional and aligns with what you're trying to achieve overall in the end.
Yeah.
Jazlyn. When we first met, you were an undergraduate here, and you were talking about entrepreneurship, and you just mentioned money again. I happen to know that you are now working on your master's in education. We're both educators from a long way back. Just a tip: you're not going to make any money.
Some of the things is the experience, the credibility, and having those research things. Everything kind of like builds to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to work in higher ed starting off, right? But long term, I know entrepreneurship is the goal. So it's just a means to get there. And like we said, I would love to be able to travel to speak right now and make the money and constantly grow as I go. But I have bills, so I need that job. But whatever
I like
job
that.
I get.
Grow as you go. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So as I'm sitting here, there's more money to be made for me to be able to increase my salary. There's more experience, more knowledge and education. And I value the degree. I value the education, though it's those experiences that I'm seeking next. So, and I'm going to get that before I get to entrepreneurship. So it's not about if, it's about, it's
When?
going to happen. Yeah.
Okay.
When.
Yeah.
And are you
And that-
thinking of going on for a PhD?
I do. I want my PhD in IO psychology. So
Okay.
the goal right now is I'm studying communication. So my niche is studying intercultural communication competence within international students within the higher education space, specifically in America. And
Boy, that is a niche.
yeah.
I mean, it really is. That's
Yes. I want to become an international motivational speaker overall. So that's going into building my brand and having different companies to be able to show the next generation how to build that and to be very intentional with it. So I'm learning what system works for me and building a refined one to be able to, sell that different organizations. But most importantly, I want to go to Microsoft, Google, and teach them how to communicate across cultures. Because even when we talk about generationally, that's culturally, right?
Yeah.
It's different cultures. And once we're able to communicate across that, we'll bridge a lot of gaps, right? So to do that, IO psychology, that's something that may come down later down the line, right? I've been doing school since I was 15. I haven't stopped. In the past 2 years, I've been in school literally consecutively, like I haven't stopped. So I do want a break in between. I want my graduate certificate. Ideally at another institution, right? I've been at Central, I've been in Michigan for some time. So going to get that to be able to help me to teach. And then once I do that, maybe take 4 something years and then go into my PhD program.
Yeah, I found that the greatest learning for me was the time between my programs. You know, the couple of years after my bachelor's, a couple of years after my master's, and getting out and getting away from Michigan was certainly a good idea. You know, I went to New Jersey, and it's another world out there, folks.
Believe it. I've never been to New Jersey. I've been to Texas. I've been out the country a few times, which kind of fueled my passion for what I'm researching currently. But I would love to go back down south, right? I was born in Detroit, but raised in Mississippi. And while I don't want to live in Mississippi, I love the Southern hospitality. I love the culture of being down south. There's other there's other things to consider with being down south, but I think that's anywhere in the world right now. But I definitely want to travel more. I've been out the country 8 times, been to Ocho Rios, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, different parts of Jamaica, because Ocho Rios is Jamaica, for those who may not know, and Mexico and beyond. And I'm very grateful for those opportunities. I just want to pass that forward. If I could pay that forward any type of way, it takes money to make money. So
Yeah.
that's the process.
Okay. So IO, industrial organizational psychology, you know, that does seem to be the one of the going concerns in psychology today. Neuropsych is another one. School psychology is another one. That people can use their intercultural skills there, because the schools in America are intercultural melting pots. I mean, I was talking to a guy who's in our department, and he did his internship down in Texas. And I think he said there were 37 identified subgroups of people. You know, just because you're a Latino doesn't mean that there are not several, subgroups of that.
The intersectionality of it all.
Yeah.
Very nicely put. Yeah. And so, that somebody who understands, cultural differences and can help, bridge those differences. Differences are not deviance. Differences are differences, right?
Yes, in some of my experiences as well as research, if you're able to get a group of people together and to be able to work together, that's purposeful, right? Especially the way that you do it, so you have to have intention behind it, but that's also profitable at the same time. Like, people are really who makes this world go round within business, within psychology, within what we want to research and so forth. So if you're able to invest into the people, the legacy is going to be greater.
Okay. Let me ask one last question about legacy. In the last episode, I held up a couple of books that Ralph and I have authored, and you said that you got a book and you're not sure about publishing it. What would your book be if you were going to publish something?
My book will actually be a sector that I don't touch upon as much, which is my poetry. And I haven't touched upon it in a minute. My poetry was that way for me to find events, for me to find a safe space where I was insecure, getting bullied, didn't know, being the only child, loneliness, depression, just figuring out life at a very, very young age. Poetry was that way where I feel like I literally rewrote my narrative. In my earlier poems, you'll see, hey, this is the setting. This is what everything around me looks like. And this is how I'm dealing with it. But I know I'm so much more. And that woman that I wrote about, that's who I am today, right?
Okay.
And plus some. And so I think there's power in writing. I think there's power in speaking. I think there's power in vulnerability, which sometimes can be viewed as fragile, depending on no matter who it is. I think there's so much power in that. And so I want to share that with the world and create a space where it be interactive, where people can reflect on their own lives in those same senses. So you're reading my story while I'm encouraging you to write yours, because I see how much it helped. And that's
So,
what I want to do.
Jazlyn, what age were you when you would put the first poem in your book?
My first poem was called The Girl Behind No Name. And listeners, if you go to my podcast, Living in Legacy, you'll hear that in my origin story as well as some of the further episodes. But it was the girl behind no name. I had moved back to Michigan for some time and I was in the 6th grade. And my English teacher had invited somebody to come teach us how to write poetry. Now, I will always write short stories like Michigan Adventures, numbers. I was very creative early on. I will sit at home when I was in Louisiana before I go ride on my tractor, just writing short stories. Like I will not stop until then. And I was perplexed. I did not know how to write a poem. I was very discouraged. I was one of those people that was really book smart. So it was something just came easier for me. That was something that challenged me, but I didn't back away from it. And so that's what served me very well, even later on. So it took me about a week or two to be able to write that poem. My grandparents, like I said, they ran a tax business. So I was always in the back office, whether I was answering their phone calls, opening doors, I was writing my poetry. And once I got it, was like, who did I want to be if nobody knew my name? Like, who would I be if I didn't have a name in this world? Who am I?
What's
What
your
would I know about?
identity?
There you go. So in writing that, that's honestly, if I'm thinking about living a legacy, it's all accumulation or a culmination of those experiences I had at, how old are we when we were in 6th grade? Maybe like 10, 12 years old.
12.
12, yes. So just
In your
writing
case,
that.
maybe 10. I could see some precociousness here. In Ralph's case, maybe 15. I don't know.
But I don't know if this is a suggestion, but it's one way to go about this.
It sounds like a suggestion to me, Ralph.
If you write your book of poetry, put a poem in, and then leave blank space and say to your reader, now react to this, write your own stuff in this blank space.
You know, it's so funny that you said that. The way I have my book structured currently is my preface shares how I intend for the book to be used. And then at the beginning, you have my first poem. Then you have 7 pages because I want them to write every day. At the end, you have a prompt that kind of asks them a question to be able to write with an affirmation at the top. And so I want those prompts to follow that poem, right, in some sense. So I had to refine those parts of it. But after 7 days, there's another poem. So it continues after my 25 poems I put in the book. At the end, I have a vision board where it's just blank space, like you said, to where, hey, it's like a congratulations and a call to action. I want you to be able to continue this journey. It doesn't stop here. You filled in all these pages, reflect, and continue to build. So it's 2 blank pages where if you want to go out and you see a magazine, you can put whatever dreams you want, and then your 6-month, 5-year, and 10-year goals at the end with my acknowledgments. And so that's how the book is structured.
So it's a workbook for legacy.
Pretty much, yes. And it's called Elegantly in Tune.
All right.
Yes.
Well, you're a very elegant person, and we just thank you very much for coming on twice in our podcasts. And Down Under, learn more if you want to listen to Jazlyn's Living in Legacy podcast. Just click on that, and you will enjoy them, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, until next time, this is Jim
And Ralph,
And this is Jazlyn.
saying, keep your stick on the ice
because we're all in this
together.